Oh, and we're live. Welcome. I didn't realize that we were hitting the live button. I'm just sharing the show right now. Welcome to the Barbershop. I'm your host of the Barbershop. My name is Dr. Christopher Salute. You are watching WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio. I'm your host for the evening. Tonight, what are we talking about tonight? We're talking about men. We're talking about, and not just men, but what it means to be a modern man in 2023 and what challenges men face. Now, before you rip me apart, right? This was a topic that CC had sent over to me, and I thought let's address this in a way that is balanced. And I looked at a couple of articles that she sent me, as well as just a couple of other kind of resources that I kind of have been looking at. Let's see what we can come up with that I think will be super valuable for us. And as you know or do not know, I'm just sharing the show with a couple of different folks, so that we can get our regulars on here watching the show. Share with Dad. Dad might like this particular concept. If you're watching on Instagram, we're going to hang out with you for about 10-15 minutes, and then we're going to switch over to our Instagram story, which we love. The Instagram story is super simple. You can just click it, and then you'll be on our live broadcast on YouTube. So we absolutely want you to come on our show, talk a bit about what issues you may have, and comment and all that kind of fun stuff. So let's get into the tea, man. Let's jump into how this kind of came about. This came about, CC sent an article to me, and the article is titled 7 Challenges That Modern Men Have to Deal With. And I'm curious to see what you think. So let's get interactive with this. What's going on with me? Job's great, work's great, life's great. Working on a couple of new projects, writing a new book, finishing a new business idea that I've been thinking about for a couple of years. So you'll see I'm building a new card game that I think is super cool. Bold and Fabulous still kind of in limbo, but we're going to figure that out for sure. Working a lot with my hands on this house has been so much fun. We're going to talk a bit about working with your hands and what that means as a man, and is that something that men have to do? So we're talking about it. We're going to talk about what the expectations of our men, and kind of what challenges they face. So the first thing I thought of, right, is one of my favorite guys on I think he's on TikTok too, but I see him on Instagram. I think his most famous video was "Don't let somebody ruin your day. Ruin it yourself. Be a man." And he's this I think he's Italian from Boston, and he's actually, I believe it or not, I think he's Tony Saragusa's cousin. Now the great Goose unfortunately is no longer with us, but that was kind of his claim to fame, is he was Goose's cousin. So I get maybe he got a little boost from cousin Tony, but he's funny. He'll one of his like, what do you call them now? Memes? But it's not a meme because it's verbal. He'll say, work till you're dead, but then get overtime. Stay a little bit longer. Be a man. And it's like really funny. And the reality is, right, is that there are some expectations put on men that I think men have to deal with. But let's take an unbiased opinion, right? Let's look at the balance here, and let's see what kind of issues that women face, and what kind of challenges that women face. So as always, right, before I jump into this article, before I jump into what challenges men face with regard to being a man in 2023, I always like to jump into a couple of different movies and TV shows. So what did I pick for this evening? This evening I picked 3 movies that I've probably talked about in some way, shape, or form on other shows, but here we'll focus on them, right? Swingers, Stand By Me, and Top Gun, with an honorable mention to Friday Night Lights. And I'll talk about what I have coined the Friday Night Lights complex. So we'll talk a bit about that, because I want to do a whole show on that. So Cece, let's take note of that. I want to do a whole show on that maybe in the next 2 weeks. So these are 3 movies that I kind of designated as, this is what I think are 3 movies that deal with, the expectations put on some men. So we start with Swingers. If you haven't seen Swingers, it's not what you think it is. Swingers is a movie set in, it was the 90s. Well, it wasn't set in the 90s. It was made in the 90s. And it's a bunch of guys, grew up in New York, moved to LA. They're trying to make it as actors, and hilarity ensues. It's Jon Favreau and Vince Vaughn before they were anybody's. And, one of the things that you find through that movie is a lot of vulnerability, a lot of conversations between Jon Favreau and a couple of other folks. Jon Favreau kind of plays the kind of demasculinized, right? The sensitive man, and he's got these issues that he wants to talk to his friends about, and his friends are, they're doing their thing though. They're out and about and they're playing video games and they're going out and that kind of stuff. There's another movie called The Strays actually with Vin Diesel that is a very similar connotation, but not too many folks know The Strays. So if you want to see a good movie, watch The Strays. It's a good one as well. But it's interesting as I watched that movie when I was growing up a little bit, I remember thinking to myself, man, if somebody was going to play me in a movie, I wish it would be Vince Vaughn. I would love Vince Vaughn to play me in a movie. And now that I've gotten a little bit older, I'm going to be honest with you, I think I'd rather Jon Favreau play me in a movie because he's a sensitive dude and he's a good looking guy, and he's a bigger guy and I'm a bigger guy, right? So you want to look good and be a big dude. So that's Swingers, right? Men talking about vulnerable stuff with other men. The second movie is Stand By Me. I think Stand By Me is a really great. It's 1986, 1984. I mean, all River Phoenix, Jerry O'Connell. I mean, these are Corey Feldman. I mean, these are stars, right? Josh Brolin, right? So Stand By Me, real quick, is it's about a couple of kids who take a voyage to. They go to see a dead body. And it's something that they wanted to see, and they found out about it, and they shouldn't have, and they go to see it, and then this, it's funny, it's dramatic, it's a lot of things, but what you learn in that movie is, the way in which kids communicate to each other, the way in which boys communicate with each other, and the passions that they have, and the way in which they confide in one another, I think is really cool in that movie. I mean, that movie is timeless. I don't care if I had a kid right now. Well, maybe I'd wait a couple of years, but I would show him or her, if it was a guy specifically, I would definitely want to show him that movie. And I don't think that it being set in 1984 would be a problem. Like, I think he'd be able to relate to a lot of the themes in that movie. I know I certainly do. And I didn't grow up in 84. I was born in 84. So it's like, 10 years later, I'm watching that movie going, yeah. And wait a minute. The movie takes place in the 50s, by the way. So like, let's bring it back even further, right? So that's Stand By Me, talking a lot about kid talk and how young boys talk to each other. And the third movie I picked was Top Gun. I picked Top Gun because whether you're talking about Top Gun or Top Gun Maverick, right? I mean, in essence, they're definitely the same universe and they're very similar movies in a lot of respects. It's one of the big themes in that movie is kind of living up to who you want to be, and There are definitely there's a lot of gender fluidity, especially in the second one with regard to a lot of women pilots, and I love that. And so a lot of women taking on more masculine tones in that movie, and I love that. So it really doesn't matter whether you're man or woman. It really just is, living up to the thing, right? Living up to who you are. And I think that the reason that a lot of people will write about 7 challenges that men face, or talk about how hard it might be for a modern man to exist in this world, I still don't think it's that hard, right? I think men have it pretty easy, especially if you're a white man in the U.S. You're doing pretty okay for yourself. There's a lot of things that you don't need to worry about. You can walk into most rooms and not have to worry about a lot of stuff that folks of color, women, just don't have to deal with. But what challenges do you face? And I think that Top Gun is a great example of what and especially, I think about it as a millennial, right? Because Rooster, right, Goose's son in the second movie, had a lot to live up to. And it's like, you don't realize what the pressures that you put upon yourself. You truly do. In doing some research and just kind of reflection for this podcast tonight, I thought about, my growth as a man. I'm 38 years old. And I think to myself, my father at 38 years old, I mean, he had 2 kids. I mean, he didn't birth 2 kids. My mother did, but he brought 2 children onto this earth, and he fed them, and he clothed them, and he bathed them, and he truly was a rock star. And I think to myself, I don't know if you heard me. I was like, kind of not yelling at Joker, but yelling to Joker, like, all right, baby, you're gonna go out after my podcast. You literally just went out, and I'm like, if I had a kid right now, how would I explain that? Like, you don't need to go pee right now. You know what I mean? So there's just a lot of expectations that we set upon ourselves. There's a poem that I wrote when I was in my 20s about being a man, and how whether it's being good with your hands or being good with money or being good in your career or being quiet, being the strong silent type, these are a lot of expectations that I think men put on themselves, or are put on them, that I don't think we generally see all the time. So I think that's super important, right? Again, with the caveat that men are still doing pretty okay in this world, right? There's a lot of challenges that women go through, right? My favorite meme is like, guy asked the girl, can you cook? And she's like, okay, can you build me a house? So it's like, there's a lot of expectations that we tend to have. So before we jump into the actual beef of this article, the third kind of TV show movie that I didn't talk about, because I think it should be its own show, is something that I've coined, and you may have heard me say it before. It's called the Friday Night Lights Complex. The Friday Night Lights Complex. So Eric Taylor in Friday Night Lights, and even the original movie played by Billy Bob Thornton. This is a man who is played over and over and over in various movies. It's not just Eric Taylor. This is a man who is portrayed in a lot of media forms as a strong, silent man, takes care of his family, shows very little emotion, has to deal with a lot of things going on in his life. And all the folks around look, in this show, give me some credit. You can categorically say all around him are people showing a lot of emotion, kind of losing their cool sometimes, and Eric is moving forward every episode. He's just kind of staying chill, staying calm, and that's really challenging as a man to not. You don't see Eric break down once in any episode. You don't see him confide in anybody, really. You don't see him break down. You see him kind of talk to his wife a little bit, but you don't really see him kind of do it, And so that's why I call it the Friday Night Lights complex, right? We see that in so many different television shows and movies. You want to talk about this new phenomenon, right? Yellowstone is popping up. Everyone's watching Yellowstone. Rip is the perfect example of everyone loves Rip, right? Because he's this strong guy who doesn't need to talk about his emotions. Let me be honest with you, though. The Rips and the Kevin Costners of the world, and, even I would say Charlie Hunnam from Sons of Anarchy, the role that he played, or, the Marlon Brando's Godfather. Well, that a lot of these folks also have toxically masculine traits too. We won't get into that, but these are folks who, they don't show a lot of emotion. They don't even show you that they have emotion. Not that their emotions may be erratic at times or moving from one place to the next. They literally don't show emotion. And so, I just don't see that being a realistic depiction of what men in society need to be and should be. To me, it's the equivalent of if every woman on every television show was a Stepford wife, right? Just cooked and cleaned and, did their eye makeup and, and worse, went to work now, right? I hope I will say, as a modern man in 2023, have the foresight to look at my partner or any other partner that I've had and say, you've got it pretty tough, dude. Like you've got to work now. You weren't working in the 50s, but that's a privilege you have, which is fantastic. And you still have all of these. Hold on a second. Let me backtrack. That is not a privilege that anyone has. It's a right that they have. Edit that. But it's a right that you've taken, which it should be. And you also have all these other expectations on you, whether it's makeup and beauty or fashion or, men asking you if you can cook or being motherly and nurturing or whatever. I mean, there's so much that goes on there. So men face the same thing too, right? So while I'm reading some of the points of this article, whether you're man, woman, gender neutral, gender fluid, tell me about some expectations that you have for yourself or that others have had for you. I want to hear them. I think, I have a lot of friends in the LGBTQ plus community, and, I hear that all the time. I hear a lot about, the expectations set on them, not them as a group, but my specific friends, that they're expected to feel a certain way and act a certain way and be a certain way. And that's just not the way that they are. Right. So let's jump into the article. So this article is 7 challenges that modern men have to deal with. It is on psychreg.org. So could be a decently, reputable article, right? So let's see. they list a few of them, and I'm going to be honest. I mean, I just think it's very basic. So we're going to jump into some of these, and we're going to really hit the beef of these. So number one, some men face obstacles which they struggle to get past. So whether it be shifting your perspective, things in your history, things in your past, things your partner may or may not have done or said, men do struggle to get past these things. And what's very interesting is as a man who grew up in traditional settings, I see a lot of the men in my life not taking care of themselves and their mental health, right? So not going to a psychotherapist or psychologist once a week or twice a month, not taking care of their spirituality, their mental health. And I think that if men want to be taken seriously in this new world that we're now creating, they need to really start taking their health seriously. And taking your health seriously it has so much to do, sure, with physical health, but so much to do with what's up here and what's in here, right? Understanding yourself as a human being is just super, super valuable. Number two, some men lose motivation. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the instances of men in depression are absolutely, wild, right? And it's not to say that men get more depressed than women, but men will actually go through suicide quicker or more often than women do. It's just the execution of the actual suicide takes place more often with men. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but you tend to see it. Some men live their lives on autopilot, meaning that they just kind of don't feel like they have a reason to kind of wake up every morning and do the things, and I think that comes from this expectation of not showing emotion, right? I think it comes from the expectation of not being who it is that you want to be. I mean, we're all complex beings, right? With wonderful, beautiful things inside of us that we want to share. And I think that, men and women both have this stigma about them. If you're a good person, if you're a good partner, you don't take that opportunity to kind of share that emotion. I'll be real with you. I mean, I'm a huge fan of showing my emotion, probably too often. And I think Megan would probably tell you the same thing. Is that very often, sometimes I show my emotion too much. But, one thing that I say to men that I coach all the time is it's okay to be angry, right? It's not okay to show anger in a negative way. It's not okay to lose your temper, but it's okay to be angry. And it's okay to show that, right? So show that kind of emotion. So I think that's super valuable, right? Don't live your life on autopilot. Some men are scared by their own vulnerability. So it's almost universal expectation that girls become women simply by reaching physical maturity. It's not the same with boys. They have to pass the test. They need to show courage, demonstrate physical prowess. I'm going to be honest, that is the stupidest thing I've ever read in my entire life. Strike that from the record. Men do not have to pass any more tests than I think women have to pass. I think the reality is that men are not as prompted to show their vulnerability, I think, because it's just not something that is expected of us. And I think that as we get to these 2023s of the world and we move to 2030 and 2040 and 2050, we're going to see that gender is starting to play a role for both folks in a more fluid way, right? We're starting to see, I think, that women can have more masculine traits, and that's fine, right? They can be successful in sports and business and be competitive and aggressive and all these things, which we coined as masculine traits, but they're really just the traits that they are. It really shouldn't have masculine or feminine labels to them, but somehow I think Freud did that. So if they're doing that, I think then men can show the more feminine traits, right? Or sensitive traits. And I think that's super, super important. So I think that, being scared by their own vulnerability is something that'll start to dissipate over the next couple of years and decades. So we're at the top of the time. It's about 7:20. Let's take a break, Cece. We're going to come back. We're on WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio. We're watching The Barbershop. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Sloop. We're talking about the 7 challenges that men in modern 2023 have to face. If you're on Instagram, we're going to say goodbye. You could just check us out on the story and log into YouTube. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your comments. So talk to us about whatever gender you are. Talk to us about what expectations are set upon you that you are living up to or not living up to. We want to hear about that. This is WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio. You're watching The Barbershop. We'll be right back. And we're back. Welcome to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio. I'm your host of The Barbershop, Dr. Christopher Salute. You are watching The Barbershop on Going Bold Wednesdays. Today, we're talking about what it means to be a man in 2023. 7 challenges that modern men face from psychreg.org. I'm going to be honest with you, not a huge fan of the way that they're depicting men and gender issues, so we're going to just pick apart a couple more as we reach the end of our show. The ones that we've gone through were very vague, losing motivation, facing obstacles, blah, 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 blah. The last 2 in this 7, right, or last 3. So let's see. Some men face unrealistic expectations. So, I'll jump into unrealistic expectations for a second that I think we can discuss. I think as men age, I think that there are certainly some unrealistic expectations that are set upon them. But it's not to say that women don't face the same thing, right? But we happen to be talking about men. In fact, funny enough, so I sent this podcast out to a couple of folks and was like, hey, come watch my show or whatever. And the most common response I got from like 3 different folks were like, are you going to do a show about women and how women face so many issues? And I said, no, I can't do that show, right? That's I'm not a modern woman. I'm not a woman. But I welcome anybody who wants to have that show with me or without me. Please feel free to do it, But men, we all face unrealistic expectations. One of the things that I think about, this article I thought was very interesting. 15% of men account for 15% of those folks who have eating disorders, to which I reply, okay, but there are 85% women who suffer from eating disorders. So, sure, men do too, but not nearly in the numbers that women do. But, one thing I will say is this, as men's bodies change, right, there are some expectations, I think, placed upon us that either are placed upon us or we place upon ourselves. So one of the things that you're going to see men struggle with over the course of, once they hit 30 to 40 years old, is their balance of testosterone. And, so men who are high in testosterone will tend to lose a lot of their hair. So you'll see, I have huge bald spots and I've lost a lot of my hair here. There are ways in which you can fix that hairline without getting surgery. You can bring in testosterone blockers or biotin to do that. Now, I want you to use your common sense for a second. What is that going to do to your body if you start blocking the testosterone in your body? It's going to affect how the mechanics of your body work down there, right? And so you've got to make some choices as a modern man. Do I want hair or do I want sex? Good sex, right? Now, do I want good sex and then take another pill? And then is that pill going to boost my testosterone, which is going to make me lose my hair? And then blah, blah, blah. Is it going to change the way my bowels work? Because that also is a big, is related to how our mechanics work down there as well. So do men face unrealistic expectations? I think, sure. I think women do too. So I'd be interested to hear who's on the show. If you're a woman, let me know what expectations you're facing. Other expectations that I think are interesting are, coming home from a full day of work and repairing things around the house, right? I think that's ridiculous. Now, I'll be honest, I get out of power tool at least once every other day because I like to do that, right? I like to take a moment and just fix something. Some men do. Some men don't, though. And it's the same phenomenon that we see, right, with when the child is enjoying coloring with the coloring book, and then you say, hey, I'll give you $1 every time you color within the lines, and all of a sudden they lose all the intrinsic motivation to do that. Because the minute something becomes a job, right, the minute something becomes part of your day-to-day life that you must complete for the point, for the point system, for your credits to be earned, it's going to lose that zeal. So sure, do men face unrealistic expectations? Absolutely. So does everyone. Some men are rejected constantly. I think what I will say here is that, this article is ridiculous, but I will say this. I think that the type of rejection, now I'm not even going to get into men in your DMs and your right to reject them, because you have the right to reject them, and men should chill the F out and stop being dicks. But do men feel a sense of rejection? I think what men feel more often would be a sense of disappointment, right? So, we are taught to be competitive. We are taught to be, to win at all costs, to provide for ourselves and our family, to make money, to fix things, to buy a house, these large scale things that are measures of our success. And I think that, that rejection that we see when we have our dreams in hand, sure, it can take a toll on what a man, what a man is made to feel. And then lastly, some men are sitting on their dreams that are, so far out of reach, talking about maybe writing a book, something like that, or becoming fluent in Spanish. Sure. But I think the last I read from my own publisher, she publishes a lot about people who want to write books. I think it's like 67% of all Americans just want to write a book. So I don't know if I see that as a men's difference. So if this prompted me, I was reading a lot of these articles, and this prompted me to do some of my own research, because I'm like, this article's a little lame. So I actually found a bunch. I found yourdosed.com, Medium, which is great, Euthiaquas.com. I don't even know if that's, New York Times. But lastly, which I think is probably your best indication of what challenges men face in 2023, the Pew Research Center, right? Like you want to go right to the source with this stuff, right? Let's go right to where it's at. So Pew published this in 2017. So the world has changed a lot, but has the world changed that much? Relatively, not necessarily. So what traits or characteristics do you think people in our society value, for example? What's valued most in men? Honesty and morality versus valued most in women, physical attractiveness. So there are some issues right there, right? So men are taught to be moral, women are taught to be beautiful. You can't actually teach someone to be beautiful. You were either born symmetrical or you were not, right? Professional, financial success would be number 2 for men. Empathy, nurturing, kindness for women, right? These are gender norms that we see all the time. Ambition and leadership for men, then intelligence for women, strength and toughness for men, honesty and morality for women, hard work, good work ethic for men, ambition and leadership. Now, what's interesting, you go from 35% of what we value most in women would be physical attractiveness. By the time you get to 1, 2, 3, 4, by the time you get to ambition and leadership, which is number 5 on that list from the Pew Research Center, only 9% of those studied valued ambition and leadership in women. Another 9% valued hard work. Another 8% valued professional and financial success. So 35% of people value attractiveness. 5% ability to multitask. Politeness and respectfulness is another high one. Well, not a high one, but another one. Very interesting that you get all the way down to 5 rungs on that percentage scale. I mean, that would be the 5th number on Family Feud. And then you finally get to ambition and leadership. Then right under that is hard work and good work ethic. Then number 7 would be financial success and professionalism. Versus men, we are wanting to be honest and moral. And then right after that, we have the ability to value professional and financial success in the eyes of society. So do we see that as a barrier? Sure. But do we also see that as a privilege? Sure. Right? So we have to be careful when we talk about the barriers and what is facing modern men, because it's a privilege also to have financial success and professionalism be one of our core values as expected by society, number 2 on our scale, versus number 1 of women being physical attractiveness, something they have very little control over. When you get down to what's valued in men, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rungs down would be physical attractiveness. Only 11% of those studied valued physical attractiveness over all other things. So I thought that was really, really, really interesting. Here's another Pew study. Large gaps in the public's view of the types of pressure men and women face. I just want to click this. Wait, hold on. I lost the original article. Let me just put that in a new tab. So, where'd it go? No, stop that. Okay. Can I just open it in a new tab? There we go. I swear to God, I know technology. So percent of men and women facing a lot of pressure, percent of folks saying that men or women face a lot of pressure to do each of the following. So again, Family Feud style. Several people were polled in this Pew Research study. This is the amount of people who felt that men face a lot of pressure versus women. So supporting their family financially, 76% of those studied believe that men face a lot of pressure in supporting their family versus only 40% in women. So that's real, right? That's a real number. Be successful in their job and career, very similar. 68% for men, 44% for women. Be an involved parent. Now, here's where it gets totally screwed. Only 49% of those polled thought that that men face a lot of pressure to be an involved parent, versus 77%, the highest percentage so far for women feeling pressure to be a good parent. And then being physically attractive, this will kill you. 27% found that men find that to be a social pressure versus women's 71%. So you do absolutely see a lot of differences in the way that men and women are perceived and what is valued by our society, and I think that's complete trash, right? They go on to do a lot of and there's a lot of great graphics here. They cross-reference and moderate education with gender roles. They cross-reference sexuality. I think this one's really good. So let me move this one to a new tab so I can read this one. Among men, more than 4 in 10, so that's 40%, say that men face pressure to join in when their peers talk about women in a sexual way. And I can categorically say that is certainly something that men feel a lot of pressure to do. It's also wrong. That locker room kind of toxicity is something that I think we need to start as men saying no to. But here are some other numbers. So this is all polled. Men were all polled. They were polled on, do you feel as though it's important for you to be emotionally strong, be interested in sports, be willing to throw a punch if provoked, join in when other men talk about women in a sexual way, and then have many sexual partners? So let's jump into it. 41% felt that they needed to be emotionally strong. 45% felt that they needed to be somewhat emotionally strong. So that's kind of that Eric Taylor Friday Night Lights syndrome. 28% felt that they needed to be interested in sports versus 44% felt they needed to somewhat. So still, you're in the 70s, right? I found this one to be interesting. 15% be willing to throw a punch versus 42% somewhat being willing to throw a punch. So you're still over 50% of men feel it's their duty to throw a punch. Now, it's funny. There's that famous video from Anthony Mackie, right? He talks about that. He says, and this is him talking. It's not me talking. He says, he was being interviewed by, I think, Serena Williams, and not Serena Williams. Whatever her the Williams show. I forget her name. And she says, do you believe in gender roles? Do you think that it's my job to make you a sandwich? And he says, yeah. And everyone boos him. And he says, well, now wait a second. If we're out at a club and somebody disrespects you, are you going to say something, or you need me to say something and potentially get in this guy's face? She said, well, you're the man. You need to say something. He goes, that's right. And I will say something. He goes, so make daddy a sandwich. And it was very interesting kind of, so he was laughing, and they kind of, the audience was like, okay, yeah, we kind of get it. And yes, it's funny. At the same time, there is this kind of gender, juxtaposition that we face, right? So if you're going to do X, then I'm going to expect X plus 1, right? Or X and Y, right? Whatever the issue is. So, being able to throw a punch, sure, but then what is it that, I'm going to be expected to not do in the future? Join in with other men we talked about in a sexual way, and having many sexual partners. 11% felt that was very important. 29% felt it was somewhat important. So not huge on the scale here, but the reality is that, there are a lot of gender pressures that we as men and women are facing. We talked a bit on the show earlier about, Rihanna and her being pregnant and getting up and doing what she did in the Super Bowl, which I think was absolutely stupendous. And you can, I put it on social media. I was very impressed with her performance. The only thing that I wish would have happened, I'm a huge Jay-Z, I'm a huge Kanye fan. I think she's done a song with Eminem as well. These are 3 artists that produced with her some of her best work, right? Just realistically, like the hits, I think if I look her up, those are like 2 out of her top 5 are with one of those artists. And so I just thought it would have been cool to bring up another artist, which most Super Bowl folks do. I'm not saying that Rihanna doesn't deserve the spotlight and stage by herself. most Super Bowl performers will bring other artists on. So I thought that was something that I would have expected. But I thought to myself, so many people were getting into. Oh, what did I just do? Where did I go? Oh, there we go. Sorry, I lost myself. So many people were criticizing, that Rihanna wasn't moving a lot and she wasn't singing a lot. First of all, very few singers at the Super Bowl sing their own music. It's typically lip synced. It's very hard to manage the acoustics and the audio in that space. You typically are going to lip sync. Number two, this woman was freaking pregnant and she looked fire. Let her elevate above the stage for 200 feet and sing and do her thing. You know what I mean? And so, but you talk about, what I posted on LinkedIn and Twitter was Rihanna's performance and the criticism of it is exactly what being a woman like in this country is. This woman showed up to work pregnant, kicked complete ass, like performed at the highest level. I mean, performing at the Super Bowl is not like singing the national anthem at your local, Little League game. You know what I mean? Like the highest level. Now, was she as good as other performers? It's not for me to say. I'm not. I don't judge that. I thought she was great. She's not one of my favorite artists. There are other Eminem's, without a doubt, my favorite artist. I would have watched him do a Super Bowl again. I love Rihanna. I think she's fantastic. I thought her songs were incredible. So, did she perform at a high level? Absolutely. And you've got men sitting on the couch wiping the Doritos off their shirt and criticizing this woman. And what makes it even more interesting is that she's a woman of color as well, right? So just goes to show, I mean, how ridiculous we, the standards that we hold for men and women, right? In so many situations, right? So if I'm being honest, I didn't love this one article, but what it did was prompt me to kind of look into some other articles, men being the victim of social expectations, the lasting impact of male gender socialization, and this kind of man up expectation, which I think we should do a full show on. We'll do a show on something called, we'll call it man up. Men aren't allowed to be different from society's expectations of masculinity. I think that's a really interesting one as well. And then what was very interesting before we wrap the show up. So about 7 years ago, the New York Times publishes an article called 27 Ways to be a Modern Man. I'll read a few. Before the modern man heads off to bed, he makes sure his spouse's phone and his kids' electronic devices are charging for the night. The modern man uses the proper names for things. For example, he'll say helicopter, not chopper. The modern man has never pinned a tweet, and he never will. The modern man listens to Wu-Tang at least once a week. The modern man has thought seriously about buying a shoehorn. Okay, I have. But hear me out. They work. And we'll pick one more. The modern man cries. He cries often. Now, it's been 8 years now since that article was published, and there have been a lot of new articles written, both in favor and adversely with regard to that article. I think the reality is, if I'm being honest, I love certain pieces about. I love the stats, right? I love the data. But the actual times in which I'm gonna let society or an article tell me what challenges I face or what my role as a man are, I mean, go to hell. I think that as a man, that is my right, and that is probably the most manly thing that you can do, is to define who the hell you are, right? Some men that I admire, Barack Obama, Lin-Manuel Miranda. I would say Eminem. He's cerebral. He's an intelligent guy. Other men. Sylvester Stallone is in his 70s and still producing incredible work. I would say, there's so many. Who's the Tyson? What's that guy's name? I can't think of his name. Tyson DeGrassi, right? He's Stephen Hawking. I mean, these are intelligent, wonderfully intelligent men who I admire very much, and they are not necessarily your typical, what you typically look at when you think about men. So I think the reality is that it's up to you as a man or woman or gender fluid or whomever or trans or whatever you identify as, to identify as yourself more than anything. And to allow those pressures to be just that, keep on the outside, right? Pressure, comes at a point, you'll feel pressure at a point where you're showing resistance, right? So show resistance to that pressure by keeping it out of your life, is the bottom line. So thanks so much for joining us today. We talked about the 7 challenges of modern men today in 2023. I'm your host for The Barbershop. This is The Barbershop on WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network Radio, on Going Bold Wednesdays. I am Dr. Christopher Salute, MBA, PhD, blah, 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 life and relationship coach, but would love to hear from you. Please do get at me if you want to talk about these things. We all should, right? And this is seeing life coaches, therapists, spiritual guides, to me, are just as valuable as going to your general practitioner, your doctor or your OBGYN or whomever you go to. I mean, they set the stage for true health. Anyway, thank you so much for showing up tonight. Thank you so much for watching The Barbershop. That is all we have to say this evening. Thanks for coming. Cut.